Liking Grand Seiko has become kind of almost like a cult thing. Overall, in the watch community, I feel like there's too much praise when it comes to Grand Seiko, and there's too little understanding of what it means to be a watch enthusiast. Before we continue, I'd like to give a quick thanks to kenwatches.com. They're a watch dealer in Hong Kong, and they're the ones that let me have access with these two pieces, Grand Seiko Snowflake and the GMT that you see in this video. Do check them out at kenwatches.com. So let's talk about the term fanboy. I'm referring to Grand Seiko fanboys. We have Rolex fanboys, those that are very interested in only Rolex because of the status. So when I say the term fanboy, I'm using it in a kind of derogatory way, not just someone who's a fan of the brand. I mean someone who places a certain brand over everything else, predominantly because of status. So Grand Seiko fanboys. Now this kind of seems and sounds counterintuitive because when someone typically likes Grand Seiko, you kind of assume them to know a bit more about watches and be more knowledgeable in the horological aspect of watches, because Grand Seiko has never been a status item. It's never been the hottest thing to own. But what I'm actually talking about are Grand Seiko fanboys. So these are people that have decided that Grand Seiko is the greatest thing on earth. And well, it's probably better than sliced bread. They've decided this because they believe in being unconventional and being unique and being something different to the common watch enthusiast. So it's not that they love Grand Seiko because of what exactly the watch means, but it's because they love Grand Seiko because it's provenly cool to do that. In the recent years, it's provenly cool to go against the grain of Rolex, Omega, the common brands. So people who exceedingly praise Grand Seiko and put down other brands, these are Grand Seiko fanboys. It's a small community, but I've noticed that it's been growing over the last few years, and it's becoming a problem because if you say something negative about Grand Seiko, people like to immediately put you down as someone that's not that well read, or as someone that does not have distinguished taste when it comes to watches. But that's not true. Disliking Grand Seiko doesn't mean anything. It does not have any bearing on what kind of watch enthusiast you are. Now, before you decide that I have some sort of agenda against Grand Seiko or people that like Grand Seiko, I want to go over why it's good to like Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko has cemented itself in the watch community because undeniably they have very advanced movement technology and manufacturing precision. Now, precision, that's what Grand Seiko is really known for. Not just because people like their spring drive or a couple of other quartz technologies that they have, which are all great, but that's not the reason. The Japanese Kaizen philosophy of continuous and marginal improvements is world-renowned for being some of the best manufacturing principles. It's also why Japanese are so great at almost everything they manufacture. So naturally, we can attribute this to be one of the reasons why Grand Seiko is great as well. Regardless of any stigma around Grand Seiko, liking it, disliking it, superficially liking it because it's cool, you can't deny their flawlessness in execution when it comes to all of their watches. You might not like the designs, they might not be to your taste, they might be reserved, they might be a bit odd, but the thing is, they are done to a precision that is hard to find for the similar price anywhere else. You hear people like me, other watch enthusiasts on YouTube, constantly throw around this buzzword, Zeratsu. This is just a high polish, and people love to use this word even in a very superficial sense to prove knowledgeable on the subject. Now, another reason to like Grand Seiko is because of their value proposition. The level of finishing you can't find for the same price range anywhere else in any brand, pretty much. Even if you go to independent brands, there you might get close, but the prices are typically a bit higher than Grand Seiko. What's unique about Grand Seiko and Seiko is everything is completely their own. It's in-house to the very core of the word, because they make their movements, they produce their watches, and nothing is really outsourced like most other brands. When Grand Seiko say made in Japan, it really carries more weight than other brands saying Swiss made. Now, here's why you shouldn't like Grand Seiko, and here's what a fanboy does. Just have a look at the comment section on this Joe Rogan podcast with Matt Farah. Now, this was the early days of Grand Seiko recognition. I mean, it's only been the last 5 years or so where Grand Seiko has really come into its own thing and become well known in the overarching watch community, particularly Western markets. So looking at these comments, I feel like it's provenly cool to like Grand Seiko, or the watch community sometimes tends to force people into liking Grand Seiko. A certain part of the community likes to feel like they're better watch enthusiasts because they love Grand Seiko far more than Rolex or something more mainstream. I think this is utter crap. Not liking Grand Seiko has nothing to do with what kind of an enthusiast you are. Don't fall into anybody else's narrative. Just because someone likes Grand Seiko doesn't make them a superior watch enthusiast. And Grand Seiko is no better than any other brand. It's just perception. I seriously think no one brand is better than another brand. It just comes down to what people like. It's a flavor. It's a different flavor. Grand Seiko is a different flavor to Rolex, and that's a different flavor to Omega or Vacheron or Patek or AP. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. I want to know what you think. I'm quite sure that a lot of you clicking on this video are Grand Seiko enthusiasts, and I like Grand Seiko as well, but just like any other brand, I don't hold them to higher standard than something else just because they are Grand Seiko or any such reason. I want to know how you feel about this subject. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Either is fine. I just want to know what you think. What do you think of this growing mentality of liking Grand Seiko means you're a true watch enthusiast, whereas liking Rolex just means you're in it for the status? Which can be true in some cases, but it's not always the case. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know how you'd tackle this topic. And thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Cheers.